Is everything in our world just the result of physics? Did the Big Bang script our entire lives? If it did, then there's no real difference between an asteroid crashing into Earth and you listening to Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. They're just particles in motion following the same physical laws. Think about the last time you heard a song that just made you feel something. What was it? My all-time favorite song is Landslide by Fleetwood Mac. But in a world that's purely determined, I have no choice but to love that song, and neither do you for the song that you choose. It's all just our genetics, our experiences, or whatever have you that makes you feel the way that you do when you listen to that song. But that just doesn't feel right. Our lives feel far more intimate than that. Our experiences, such as our favorite songs, suggest there's far more to life than just atoms banging into each other and math equations. Yet, if strict materialism is true, then so is determinism. And this means that despite how we feel about it, every aspect of our lives could be the outcome of a colossal physics equation. In a universe where free will is merely an illusion, our daily choices and actions might be no more than highly complex billiard balls colliding with one another, all set in motion by the Big Bang. It's hard to imagine that this Sistine Chapel and the bug guts that are smashed all over your windshield during a road trip have the same level of artistic value. Yet that's what we're forced to say when we remove free will from our experience. Because without it, we have no rationality, and without rationality, we have no choice, which means we have no creativity, no moral responsibility, whether negative or positive, and most importantly, we have no knowledge, the thing that results from rationality, which enables us to evaluate the claim, there is no free will. Still, despite the way one might feel about the possibility of a determined universe is not enough to make a decision one way or another. Feelings can never be the basis of rationality, or should they? I mean, maybe I was just determined to think that. But regardless, to get to the bottom of the free will question, one must uncover the influences upon our potential free will, and the type of strength these influences have on our decision-making. According to the philosopher Aristotle, the aim of all beings was to achieve what he called the good. And the good is this principle in which all beings are actualized and reach their fulfillment. And once one reached their fulfillment, he called it a state of eudaimonia. And this was kind of an ancient Greek way of saying they were living their best lives. To Aristotle, every human decision and action is aimed at acquiring some form of good. For example, a basketball player aims to acquire the perfection of basketball by fully actualizing his potential as a basketball player, and thus practices the necessary things to be a good basketball player, like dribbling, shooting, and defense. The subject, or the person who wishes to participate in the good of basketball, is thus moved to participate in the being of a basketball player, which is a good sought in as a means to itself. And all of nature operates this way, moving towards an end that allows it to reach its potential, because that's where it flourishes, in the good. However, every being pursues the good according to its capacity and nature. And this means that each of us approaches the good differently. An oak tree does not and cannot participate in the good of a Lord of the Rings fanfiction writer. Why? Because they have different capacities for good. So, since different beings have different goods according to their nature, naturally choices start to arise for those beings with rationality. For instance, to achieve the good, does a human eat a juicy steak or do they eat hay? Or to be more realistic, do they eat a juicy steak or do they drink a tasty IPA? Both options have some good according to the circumstances, but one may not be the best for each person. Given various circumstances, one may choose this for a certain reason or that for a certain reason. For example, a bodybuilder may choose the juicy steak, or a construction worker getting home after a long day might choose the IPA. By understanding that our actions are driven toward fulfilling our unique potentials, we see that choice is an inherent part of our pursuit of happiness. It's this ability to choose, guided by our nature and external influences, which aim toward our version of the good, that shapes our journey towards fulfillment. Our intellect and rationality allow us to make these kinds of choices. Think of it this way.
Our mind is like a compass, but our will allows us to take the first step. Thomas Aquinas, a medieval philosopher building on Aristotle's ideas, pointed out that the good isn't always obvious to us. For example, take someone trying to get into shape. They want to go for a jog, but they've cut calories and don't feel they have the energy. Do they take a quick snack to fuel them, or do they forego the snack and do some less strenuous exercise? Both options are good, but which one presents the best option? And this is why we need our intellect to guide our decision-making power, our will, because with it we can choose not just what's good, but what's best. We all naturally desire what makes us happy, but in a world filled with so many appealing options, we have to choose wisely to reach our highest potential for flourishing. Yet, it's important to note that the intellect in its present state is not entirely free from outside influences. This means that the will is still free, yes, but there are certain things which affect the intellect and influence it, giving it certain predetermined perspectives. These outside influences can take the form of genetics, environment, brain chemistry, or even personality. Many people start leaning towards determinism at this point because when we consider these influencing factors, it can seem like they're just too powerful to overcome. Thomas Aquinas didn't have access to the scientific knowledge we have today to deeply examine these forces. However, he had an early understanding of them, and he referred to them as the passions. For example, we might give too much weight to things which are less good for us, like pleasure, or we might be moved to things which are more good for us, like loving others through empathy or sorrow. The key to making these passions work toward the good is through the development of virtues. Virtues act as good habits that help us choose the right thing at the right time, bridling the strength of the outside influences that affect our reasoning for one good or another. The fact that we have virtues corresponding to different passions suggests that we have a choice between at least two options. Think about anger for a minute. Recall the last time you were about to get really angry about something. You either decided to give in to your anger, judging that it may be the right thing to do, or you decided to control yourself because it just wasn't worth it. Just like you, some people learn to control their anger, showing restraint and patience, while others struggle to keep it in check. But in a purely determined world, shouldn't there only be two types of people? Those who are angry and those who are not? There shouldn't even be a possibility to ignore an impulse one way or another. If determinism were true, there would be no immaterial force, like the will, that could counteract these influences on our intellect, whatever they may be. However, for the sake of argument, let's accept the determinist viewpoint and follow their conclusions to see where they lead.
So let's say that these influences are indeed powerful enough to override a free decision. Then, if that's true, the conclusion that all decisions are reduced to physical equations. And here's why. Being that physics consists of a system of inputs and outputs, one could never have any sort of control on the decisions that they make. Robert Sapolsky, a forerunner in determinist thought, explains that if you had my genes, my brain, my life experiences, and were exposed to the same set of circumstances, you'd make the exact same choices that I do. Free will is just a deeply held cultural illusion. But wait a minute.
If all of our choices, including our thoughts and beliefs, are predetermined, then even our judgment of what is true or untrue is also predetermined. This means that determinist thinking invalidates itself, but the very notion of determinism makes it impossible for us to have an accurate idea of truth because we have no control over what we believe, because what we believe is predetermined by physics and are merely a result of random inputs and outputs, not genuine reasoning.
So, in other words, believing in free will is actually the only option because it's the only option which allows us to seek knowledge and have knowledge in the first place. Because without free will, we wouldn't have the ability to evaluate arguments, choose between something correct or incorrect, or seek truth at all, making the entire conversation fruitless. So, the determinist argument kind of fails to even get off the ground because it invalidates itself. Without free will, there's no possibility of having knowledge in the first place.
Even if we were to move the conversation from the ability to acquire truth to considering both positions biologically, we still find the same inconsistencies. Determinism will argue that humans are pre-programmed by their biology, which make us feel levels of empathy for various life choices while removing personal responsibility. Yet, if this were the case, we have a couple of unexplainable anomalies. If determinism were true, people would be unable to recover from addiction. If their biologies contain the preconditions for addiction, there would be no way an addict could get sober because they would have nothing to fight against the chemical impulses with. Yet, we do see addicts of various sorts quit their addictions cold turkey. It's one thing to quit an addiction by weaning or other substituting chemicals, but cold turkey quitting is the result of willpower versus brain chemistry. Personally, a few years back, I quit vaping, and every fiber or chemical in my body screamed at me to just take a hit, and it was miserable. But there was something inside of me that just wouldn't let me do it. Yet, if addiction is driven by our inevitable succumbing to things like dopamine and serotonin, this would have been impossible for me because I don't produce an anti-addiction brain chemical. It was all willpower. While this willpower very rarely wins that battle, it does happen, which would be impossible in a purely deterministic world. Another remarkable result of free will is humanity's ability to act against our natural instincts, a trait that sets us apart from other species. For example, people can sometimes make unhealthy or self-destructive choices, showing that we can choose between actions that align with or oppose our natural inclinations. And this isn't something we see in the animal kingdom. If you place food in front of a hungry dog, it'll eat it every single time. Humans, on the other hand, might refuse food even while they're hungry. Perhaps they're dieting, experiencing body image issues, or what have you. But regardless, we see them make choices that override their biological leanings. Another often overlooked example is endurance sports. Humans, in opposition to the rest of the animal kingdom, are rather unremarkable physically. Yet no other animal on the planet has the endurance that humans do. That endurance doesn't come entirely from our biology, but from our mentality. Endurance athletes often push their bodies to the limits, enduring pain and exhaustion in order to achieve a goal like running a marathon or climbing a mountain. Our natural inclination is to avoid pain and conserve energy. Yet people willingly undergo hardship for personal achievement, adventure, or charity. This choice to endure discomfort for a higher purpose goes against our basic biological instincts.
Take endurance athlete David Goggins, for example. Whatever you may think of him, I'm not the biggest fan. What he can do with his body is remarkable. The man runs hundreds of miles on broken feet or while sustaining other injuries, and he's able to do this because of his willpower. If his biology was deterministic, his body would force him to shut down long before he completed the feats that he has. But he has an option to listen to his biology or ignore it, and in this case, he ignores it. Whether it be like Goggins running 100 miles or me quitting vaping, think of something that you really wanted to do but was incredibly hard and you succeeded. Did you succeed because a chain of events leading from the Big Bang to the point you achieved just all fell into place? Of course not. That'd be ridiculous because you know that you set your mind to something with your will and you achieved it because you causally changed the events that needed to take place in order to succeed your goal. Not some random event or not because of biological predeterminations.
These situations demonstrate that we have the ability to make decisions that are counter to our natural inclinations. If determinism held true in the strictest sense, and all of our actions were solely the result of biological and physical causes, such choices would be highly unlikely. And the fact that we can act contrary to our basic instincts suggests that we possess free will. The last argument in our lineup has to do with our ability to plan and achieve goals. Not only the fact that we can plan goals, but actually achieve them disproves a deterministic world. And here's why. In a deterministic framework, the ability to anticipate and act upon potential future states wouldn't be possible, as all decisions would be bound by a series of causes and effects outside our control. The acquisition of desired future outcomes, such as goals, requires transcendence of material events in order to rationalize and plan. This means that to plan and actually achieve something, We have to create entirely hypothetical events in our minds, like the steps to achieve our goals. But if everything is caused by a prior event, we can't count our hypothetical steps of goals as a means to achieving our goal, because they haven't actually happened yet. Even if someone is able to mentally observe all their required steps to achieving a certain goal and envision the necessary circumstances to the goal, the agent or the person performing it could not actually control his own course in being able to reach that goal. This is because each event is caused by its prior causative chain, and if someone were to desire a future outcome, there would be no way to control the chain of events which guarantees that desired outcome, because we're all just helpless in the causal chain of reality. Each intermediary event would throw the course completely off chart, down an undesired path, and there's nothing the person could do to redirect it, because he would have no control over the events, because to have control means to have a free will. Each required intermediary event would decrease the probability of the achievement of the goal exponentially, because each would cause a fragmented path like a runaway train.
For example, let's say you want to go to the store or something. So that requires a series of events before you actually get to the store. You have to get dressed, you have to grab your keys, you have to get in your car, you have to successfully avoid traffic on the way to the store. If you don't have any control, that's a certain amount of things that has to happen that you don't have control of. So what is the probability of all those things taking place perfectly in order for you to actually achieve the goal of getting to the score? It's like impossible. It couldn't happen, because each event would be its own event sparked by a chain of causes that you had no control over. So each step would make a runaway path down a different causative chain of events.
Let's try to explain this mathematically. Consider the probability of achieving a goal as a product of successfully navigating each required intermediary event. To successfully reach a goal, you have to move through a series of steps, with each step needing to work out as planned to stay on course. Imagine that each step has only a small chance of going right, say about 10%. That doesn't sound too hard, right? At least not for one step. But when you start adding more steps, things get tricky. With a 2-step goal, you'd need that 10% chance to happen twice in a row. That gives you only a 1% chance of making it through both steps successfully. 10% of 10%. Now, if there are 10 steps, you need that 10% chance to happen 10 times in a row. Each time, the likelihood of success drops lower and lower, stacking up against you as you go. By the time you've gone through all 10 steps, your odds are now 0.000000001. And that's a goal with a relatively small set of steps and a higher chance of success for each step. Now imagine the series of steps for a SpaceX flight.
While free will can't be proven empirically, the debate remains a question of human experiences and events. It's true that we cannot control the outside factors which influence our intellect's ability to apprehend the good, but our will nonetheless remains free to pursue it as it's informed of it, despite the various choices and influences on the intellect. And this is because the driver of human experience, rationality, requires choice, or else the entire house of cards comprised of our epistemology, our creativity, and our moral responsibility falls because it is necessitated by that choice.
If our decisions were solely determined, we would lack genuine agency, and concepts like truth, knowledge, and moral accountability would lose their coherence. Free will, then, is not simply an abstract belief, but a practical necessity. It underpins our sense of purpose, our capacity for self-directed action, and our ability to engage meaningfully with others and the world. Without it, human life would be reduced to a series of mechanical responses, void of true understanding or purpose. Free will, in this sense, is essential not only for individual flourishing, but for a coherent and meaningful existence.
Guys, I hope you enjoyed that one. That was actually a term paper for my philosophical anthropology class that I just finished. It was reworded a bit to make it a little less technical and easier to understand. So I hope you like it, and after presenting some points and some counterpoints, I'm curious as to which side of the debate you fall on. And if you felt like one point was particularly compelling, please let me know in the comments. And if you thought my arguments were whack, let me know if you think they're whack, and post a emoji of a baloney because you think my arguments are full of baloney. So if you like more content like this, please subscribe and like and share with all your friends. It really helps us out. Thanks so much. Have a good day.